You finally made it. You're retired. But what if some of the choices you're making right now are quietly pulling you back to work? Every year, countless retirees are forced back into the workplace, not because they were reckless, but because they followed advice that sounded smart and safe. So in this video, I'm breaking down the 7 most common retirement pitfalls that can derail even the best laid plans. I'm also sharing how to avoid them so you can retire once and never look back. By the way, I'm Taylor Schulte. I was named the #2 independent advisor by Investopedia. I've helped hundreds of people build successful retirements, and I've seen exactly what causes things to unravel. Let's get into it. Most retirees focus on having enough to retire, but they don't focus on what it takes to stay retired, and that's the problem. Retirement success is not just about hitting a savings number. It's about managing dozens of small decisions that add up. Decisions that either preserve your freedom or slowly chip away at it. This is what I call the retirement sustainability trap. You make a few reasonable choices, a little extra withdrawal here, ignoring taxes there, and suddenly your carefully built plan starts to crack. It doesn't happen all at once, but over time the cracks compound. Eventually, you're left with this painful question: do I need to go back to work? That's why retirement planning is not just about reaching the finish line. It's about knowing how to live on the other side of it. And what I found is that retirement sustainability isn't about complex strategies. It's about avoiding pitfalls. And I've handpicked 7 of the most common ones that increase the risk of forcing retirees back to work. Let's go through them now. Number 1 is what I refer to as dividend tunnel vision. Dividend investing sounds like the perfect retirement solution. Buy income-producing stocks and make money while you sleep. But here's the problem. That income is not free. When a dividend is paid, a company's stock price typically drops by the same amount. And that's because a dividend is simply a distribution of company profits. A slice of the company's value is being removed from its balance sheet and sent to shareholders like you. You might feel richer because you saw a cash payment hit your bank account, but mathematically, when you receive a dividend, you're in the same spot. And it doesn't stop there. Many dividend-focused strategies charge significantly higher fees than broad-based index funds. As a result, 88% of the dividend-focused funds that survived the last 30 years underperformed the basic, plain vanilla Vanguard S&P 500 fund. Lastly, high dividend stocks can be a tax nightmare. And that's because you owe taxes on dividends earned in a taxable account every single year, even if you don't spend them. Depending on your tax bracket, research has shown that dividend taxes can reduce your annual investment returns by up to 1.5% per year. So, what should you do instead? You should buy good companies at good prices and focus on total return, not yield. Since 80% of S&P 500 companies pay a dividend, a properly diversified portfolio will naturally generate income. But the current yield of a company or a fund should not influence what you include in the portfolio. Okay, pitfall number 2, the bond risk blind spot. Contrary to popular belief, not all bonds protect you during market meltdowns. For example, in 2020, the US stock market dropped 34% in 3 short weeks. During the same time period, corporate and municipal bonds, 2 asset classes often thought of as safe, were also down between 10 and 22%. Meanwhile, U.S. Treasury bonds returned a positive 5.5% during this crash. Retirees often chase higher yielding bonds for that extra income, but those bonds are riskier and can fall in value right when you need them most. We want our bonds to provide protection during catastrophic market events, especially in retirement when you're living off your nest egg. And historically, U.S. Treasury bonds have done just that. Sure, they might pay a little less interest, but they typically provide more stability. And that trade-off can be critical in retirement. Next up, pitfall number 3, and perhaps the single biggest mistake retirees can make when deciding how much to spend. I call this the withdrawal rate gamble. You've likely heard of the 4% rule. It's everywhere, but blindly using it is one of the riskiest moves you can make for 2 reasons. First, it's overly conservative and can lead to dramatically underspending over a 30-year retirement. In fact, historically, retirees using the 4% rule were more likely to end retirement with 5 times their initial nest egg than to have less than what they started with. In other words, this outdated rule can prevent you from enjoying the money you work so hard to save. On the other end of the spectrum, fixed 4% withdrawals can backfire if sequence risk rears its ugly head. Sequence risk is the danger of experiencing poor investment returns in the early years of retirement. If markets fall early and you keep withdrawing the same fixed amount, you're locking in investment losses. And this is why retirees with identical portfolios can have dramatically different outcomes just based on when they start withdrawing. A better approach to retirement income is a flexible withdrawal strategy like guardrails. With guardrails, you begin retirement with a higher withdrawal rate, typically 5 to 6%, allowing you to enjoy your early active years. And to ensure you don't overspend and outlive your money, you establish a withdrawal range. In short, when markets go up, the rules allow you to withdraw and spend more. When they go down, you'll temporarily need to withdraw a little bit less. This flexible approach helps you maximize retirement spending while mitigating the chances of running out of money. That's pitfall number 3. Let's take a quick breath and recap before we move on. So far, we've covered why dividend investing can backfire, why some bonds fail when you need them most, and how the 4% rule can increase risk and decrease spending. But these 3 pitfalls are just the beginning. The next 4 are even more common and more troubling. Pitfall number 4, overlooking the rest of the world. Here's the deal. From 2000 to 2009, the S&P 500 returned a negative 9% with dividends reinvested, a full decade of no growth. If you're still working and regularly stashing money away for retirement, an event like this is not catastrophic. But let's say you happen to retire in the year 2000, right when this lost decade began. Let's also say that you had a $1 million nest egg invested in a low-cost S&P 500 fund, and you began withdrawing 5% per year adjusted for inflation. In just 16 years, you would have run out of money. On the other hand, a globally diversified investor taking the same 5% withdrawals would have ended that same 16-year period with more money than they started with. Investing in large US-based companies might feel safe because the names are familiar and it's your home country. But putting all your eggs in one basket, especially in retirement when you're living off your portfolio, can be a recipe for disaster. So if you're in retirement or close to it, consider global diversification to help support sustainable withdrawals and mitigate the chances of running out of money. Up next, number 5, the tax planning gap. Unfortunately, taxes don't end in retirement. In fact, they often get more complicated. When required minimum distributions collide with things like dividend income, Social Security, and pensions, you can find yourself in a higher tax bracket than when you were working. And that higher tax bracket can trigger additional unwanted taxes like Medicare IRMA. It can also spike the taxes that you pay on Social Security income. And once those tax surprises hit, it may be too late to do anything about them. That's why proactive tax planning in your late 50s and 60s can be so powerful. For example, partial Roth conversions before age 73 can help reduce future RMDs, avoid taxes like IRMA, and even lower your lifetime tax bill. Don't like paying taxes on Roth conversions? Well, consider pairing them with a donor-advised fund contribution to offset the tax bill while supporting causes that you care about. Lastly, coordinating withdrawals across all account types is also key to helping you manage the tax gap in retirement, and it ensures that you're not tipping the IRS along the way. Okay, that was pitfall number 5. If you can master the next 2 final pitfalls, you'll be well on your way to a permanent retirement. Pitfall number 6 is the cash management mistake. Look, I get it. Cash feels safe. But too much of it, especially in retirement, can quietly erode your financial future. Even in today's higher rate environment, cash typically fails to keep up with inflation. Worse, many retirees often panic and move in and out of cash during stock market volatility, locking in losses and missing recoveries. I've seen retirees make the opposite mistake too, holding too little cash and being forced to sell investments during a market downturn to cover their living expenses. A scenario like that can create real, permanent damage. So what's the solution? Well, one approach is a simple, tiered system for managing your nest egg. 6 months of cash is set aside for unknown expenses, i.e. emergencies. 12 months of cash is set aside for known expenses like gas, groceries, upcoming tax bills. 2 to 5 years of living expenses are invested in high-quality bonds, and the remainder is invested in a diversified global stock portfolio. A system like this provides confidence and flexibility to handle market surprises without derailing your plan. Yes, to some, it might seem too conservative. But remember, the goal is not to chase returns with short-term money. It's to protect your long-term money from short-term decisions. Okay, last and certainly not least, pitfall number 7, the long-term care illusion. We've all heard the stat. 70% of people over age 65 will need some form of long-term care before end of life. That statistic is true, but here's what you rarely hear. Only about 13% of today's 65-year-olds will spend more than $150,000 out of pocket on long-term care, and roughly 63% of them will spend nothing. That changes the conversation. Yes, long-term care is still a risk, but it's not an automatic catastrophe for most people. So instead of reacting out of fear and buying an expensive insurance policy or avoiding the topic altogether, build a plan that aligns with your needs and your goals. That could mean earmarking part of your portfolio to self-fund this potential future expense. It could mean doing a tax-free exchange from an old insurance policy that you don't need into a new policy that provides long-term care protection. Or it might mean adjusting your spending so you can confidently absorb an expense like this if it occurred. What matters most is that your plan is intentional, because long-term care affects everything from when you retire to how much risk you take to what you leave behind. Okay, that wraps up the 7 most common retirement pitfalls. But before you go, there's one final insight you need to hear. When you look at these 7 pitfalls together, you'll notice that they all stem from a single problem: treating retirement like a math problem instead of a dynamic, decades-long transition. In the accumulation years, your job was simple: save, invest, repeat. In retirement, you need a process, one that coordinates taxes, investments, insurance, and income. And they all need to work together, not in isolation. The process that we implement for our clients is called the Total Retirement System. Here's how it works and how you can use it to ensure that you never have to unretire. Step 1, tax planning. Start by running a long-term tax analysis. This helps you compare your current tax rate to your future projected tax rate and decide when and how to make tax-smart moves in retirement. Moves like Roth conversions during low-income years, harvesting capital gains, and drawing from the right accounts at the right time. This foundation directly informs step 2, which is developing your tax-efficient income plan, or what I refer to as your retirement paycheck. Forget rigid rules like the 4% rule. Instead, consider a more flexible guardrail strategy. This lets you confidently spend more money in retirement by adjusting withdrawals up and down based on different market environments. The guardrail strategy also helps you establish and maintain a proper cash reserve so you're not forced to sell investments during downturns. Step number 3 is legacy planning. If you have goals like leaving money to heirs or giving money to charity, it's important that they are documented and integrated into the plan. This is also where you'll identify and create a plan for potential risks like long-term care or estate taxes upon death, and ensure that your estate documents are properly aligned with your intentions. Finally, step number 4, investments. With a comprehensive plan in place, it's time to align your investments with your documented needs, goals, and wishes. That includes diversifying globally, choosing bonds that offer real protection, and aligning your asset allocation with your risk tolerance and time horizon. When you put all this together, you get a retirement system that adapts with you, not just today, but as life and markets change. Because staying retired isn't just about hitting a savings number or following a simple rule of thumb. It's about having a flexible plan that can adjust with your life, your goals, and whatever the future throws your way. If you don't have a plan or you're concerned about your current retirement sustainability, click the first link in the description to book a complimentary call with my team. We will break down your current projections and give you actionable steps to secure a more stable retirement future. I'll see you in the next video.